Hello, Internet, and welcome back to our Apartment Rat series. This is another one of our catch-up episodes. Rather than make a joke about ketchup, we'll just be plunging into it, I think. Now, I chose to do this because I wanted to do some vehicle work, and I figured that you've probably seen enough of that already in the course of the series. We spent 5 or 6 consecutive episodes working on our vehicle. So I thought I would do this kind of off, just record this over the weekend and record some commentary to go over top of it. The number one priority was to get our storage battery changed out. That's the one that's leaking. It's causing our batteries not to charge properly, but there were some other things I wanted to polish off as well. Spent a while looking at the possible vehicle parts that we wanted to add and eventually settled on making a forge. It required some various electronic components, some of which we had from butchering the camera and cell phones in a previous episode, and then some of which we would have to craft. Specifically, we needed power converters. We did start to craft an electronic forge, which is required to make the vehicle forge, but we required more components for turning that into the actual vehicle forge rig. Rather than dealing with that, I decided to take a nap and then headed off to check out the local area. I wanted a frame so that we could set up our crane to remove the storage battery. Unfortunately, there were quite a lot of zombies down by the road, and I thought, I cleared quite a few and just kind of fooled around, but I decided it was in my best interest to avoid the area for the time being. Instead, I decided to harvest a frame from one of these motorbikes by the little camping area, and we began the process of setting up our crane. It didn't take very long, just throwing the cantilever on a crane or on a frame. Of course, the storage battery was located in the center of our vehicle, which the crane can't actually reach. So once again, I unfortunately had to remove a board in order to get access to the battery. Thankfully, this wasn't too much of a problem. It did slow me down, but I managed to remove the big leaky battery without too much of a problem. With that squared away, I decided to adjust the layout of our vehicle a little bit. My plan was to put the forge in the front seat where the passenger seat had been, and to place a door between it and the rear of our vehicle so that it wouldn't interfere with our sleeping quarters, because we want to be able to block the light when we go to sleep, and we don't want zombies to be able to come through that area. We don't want to leave that open when we sleep. I moved the drug pile from the front of our vehicle to the rear so that I would have a place to store my tools. Initially, I thought I would leave the cargo space there, but I decided later that we were actually going to put a workbench in that spot. And it turns out you can actually store tools on the forge itself. It has a 50-liter capacity, so I didn't have to do that, but I didn't really know that at the time. Once we'd sorted that out, I went back to crafting the electronic forge. First, though, I did drag a table and a chair over so that we would have a flat surface to work on and we would have a place to sit. Someone told me that chairs affect, if you're in a chair when crafting, it gives you a comfort bonus or something like that. I don't know if that's true, but we did it. And we eventually finished the forge, although the sun was on its way down. I removed the cargo space that was previously used for our medications so that I would install the workbench there. It was in a central location near our food cooker as well as the forge so that we could stand in the vehicle, use the workbench, and still have access to all of the materials and tools around us. Now, the workbench would require more pipes as well as some sheet metals, and I wasn't really interested in getting those things at the moment, so I chose to read instead. It seemed prudent to throw on our MP3 player. I've been not using one for a long time, and I thought, well, we'll give it a go. So I set it up with a good battery and listened to some music. I also ate a ton of bratwurst and settled in to read about weaponsmithing. I read all night without really thinking about it, and even though our character was tired, I didn't really want to waste the daylight, so I decided we would just continue working anyway. Decided to focus my attention once again on the forge rig and headed off in search of electronics supplies. Now, this took me back to the school. They had some computer terminals, which I chose to disassemble one. It gave me a lot of the materials that I had been looking for, specifically amplifier circuits, I think, and the power converters. So I decided to deconstruct a second one as well for extra components. These were all the parts necessary to craft the forging rig, so I headed back to construct it. To my surprise, it actually was very fast. It didn't take long at all to craft the vehicle rig. I installed it where the passenger seat used to be and was pretty pleased with myself. Ultimately, though, I still needed parts for my workbench. I headed back out to that chain link fence where we had gathered wire and pipes in a previous episode. Unfortunately, there was quite a lot of zombie density that would have been within sight range of us had we gone out there. There were also a few wasps. Even though we're pretty well equipped at this point, I just thought it'd be a hassle I didn't want to deal with. So I chose not to bother them and instead turned my attention to the lockers in the school. I smashed some, I deconstructed some, but ultimately we got what we were looking for. Decided that the square in front of our little kitchen appliance would be used as raw materials storage. So we were going to drop all the miscellaneous crap that we need for crafting in that tile. So I transferred a bunch of stuff around the vehicle and put everything there in a nice central location. Since I now had the forge, I would also need tools for the forge. First up was the anvil, which required a lot of frames. I decided to harvest them from the motorbikes that we had seen earlier and set about deconstructing them. The anvil actually turned out to require a crucible as well, so I started crafting that instead. But by that point, my character was hungry and sleepy, so I decided to eat a bunch more sausage and head to bed. We have a lot of that perishable food that we're trying to eat up before it goes bad. When I woke up, I started crafting a workbench, and it was around that time that a zombie decided to take a whack at my car. This frustrated me, so I bludgeoned it to death. And I started to worry around this time that my scent, combined with the light from the rear of my vehicle, would actually draw in a horde. But I didn't actually do anything about it. I figured, we can probably handle that without too much trouble, or run away if need be. I did finish the workbench without any further incident, and I managed to install it in the vehicle location that I had prepared. We can now work on things quickly from the inside of our vehicle. We didn't need that table and chair anymore. I also finished crafting the crucible, and we placed that on our forge tile for storage. The anvil came next. Apparently it was too large to actually store and use the workbench to craft it, so I don't know if we got the speed bonus for that or not. It took a really long time, but I did eventually finish it. I also placed that in our forge tile for storage. Metal tongs came next, and they were really easy and finished in no time. It was around this time that I started thinking about forging a better weapon. Specifically, I was looking at the mace. We had looked at these weapons in our previous episode, and I kind of had forgotten which one I decided would be the most optimal way to go. So I was settled on the mace and went out looking for leather. This took me again back to the school where I gathered up a bunch of purses and a leather backpack that we had dropped so that we could come back and gather up leather patches. I did eventually realize that I did not want the mace and settled on the warhammer instead. I'm not really sure what appealed to me so much about it. I think it was the best blunt weapon that also had a lot of combat abilities and did not take a very long time to make an attack. Some of the weapons, like the big flail, are double the moves per attack, and it just did not seem worth it DPS-wise. Making the warhammer required me to make a Swagian die set, which I did after harvesting some materials from a local shed. Eventually, I began working on the warhammer. This actually bumped our fab up to 9 and took a significant time to craft. Partway through, I stopped to eat, drink, and sleep again. And it was around this point that I realized I had been sleeping for several days in a row, but I never actually treated any of our wounds. We could have definitely been fully healed by now, but I'd wasted all that time sleeping. I never applied bandages or anything. Not much I could do about it at that point, so just moved forward. When I woke up, I returned to crafting our new weapon. I finished, and I was quite pleased with wielding a warhammer, which is something I'd never used before. I wanted to put our new weapon to the test, and I also wanted to gather some more metal because I wanted to make steel arm guards. So I decided to head back down to the road where I had kind of seen some monster density before and test things out. I took some time to fight the local zombie population, retreating when things seemed like I might get overwhelmed. Ultimately, though, they were really no match for my sweet new hammer, and I killed quite a few of them for really no reason other than my own pleasure. Once my bloodlust had been satisfied, I returned to our vehicle and crafted a set of steel arm guards. They're objectively better than the chitin arm guards, and so I swapped them out. In addition to being better protection, the steel arm guards also have double the warmth, which is something our character had been missing on their arms. We've been getting a lot of messages. Really, the arms were the only part that I was really concerned with warmth-wise. With all that, I felt pretty satisfied with my progress and decided to call it a day. I may have overdone it, doing a little bit too much in this episode, but I'm ultimately happy with the way that things went. This frees us up so that in the approaching episodes, we can just set off again, hoping to find some labs, which was the original reason that we hit the road in the first place. Additionally, it's worth mentioning that our batteries in our vehicle are now up at full charge. Since we removed the leaky storage battery, we are getting a much higher charge going into those other batteries. And for several days now, they've been at our cap charge, even when we were actively using the forge for crafting. So ultimately, what we set out to do, we accomplished, and I'm pretty pleased with it. So for now, that's going to do it. I don't know how long this episode will actually be, but thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the episode, and I will be back with more of our regular style episodes tomorrow. See you in the next one.